Okay, so just gonna make a video on this. Right now, I am watching videos on my laptop of some of the college courses they have. I got these little brochure deals, so I'm gonna go through and watch your YouTube videos where they have like the life of a, which is totally brilliant of the YouTube. They have these. You know, for those that don't know what kind of career you want to choose, you can watch a YouTube video and see what the daily life is of that very specific job position, or going to school and get a huge, broad knowledge of what career choices to choose from, what best fits the person and whatnot, and you get an idea of what you know you're going to be learning. And obviously the classroom and all that material stuff and field work is going to be very intense. All of it is going to be intense. But for me, as I'm going through these videos, now I can tell you this right now. Me getting into the medical field, that's just like not going to happen. Okay, it will never be anything major. But when I think of like CNAs and I think of like phlebotomists, a lot of this, procedures, they have a lot of school for. Seems like a lot of school to do a lot of. There's a lot of school to do the job position, as compared to actually doing the job itself, and yeah, that's something I'm not going to be doing. I do want to go for something simple though. One of the reasons that intrigues me to want to go to school to do this is not just because of my family. Like, I'm just not just my mother, but myself as well. And it's good to have that because you never know still what can happen. My brother Frankie. Julian is, Marco, my uncle, something can happen, right? And it is always good to have a family member in case something happens, which my participant in taking care of that person won't be, obviously, because it always causes affiliation, to my understanding, especially when it's your job. But it's always good to have a second opinion and have that knowledge, just so that there's that much comfort. I almost feel like I want to just kind of attend the class just to be able to have it and do something totally different. Just to be able to be like, hey, I got 3 months of this knowledge and this, I could do this for a living. But let me tell you something. I spent 7 years going to nursing homes. And in my youth, I went to Children's Medical Center. And I saw some... there was no counseling. There was, I saw to the very bones, brittle bones to what was going on. When I was a kid, I saw my father's stomach cut all the way open because he swallowed a toothpick hamburger with Sonic. And I was, grabbing cotton and he could feel my little fingers, slowly just kind of trying to heal him and cure him. And, when I started to go to Children's Medical Center with Aunt of mine, I'd see kids that were very sick. I didn't understand why they were bald. And I just knew they had something to do with the medicine, to my understanding. Obviously, I knew it was sick, but within several months or something like that, I knew that it was, within maybe a year, I knew that it was some sort of medication that was causing that to try to keep them alive. And there are some really, if you're looking for a sad violin and sad story, you are guaranteed to find that there. You are going to find that there, and you see some really horrible stuff. You see the family members and see how they react, how they treat their children with this sort of compassion, but the reality that the kid isn't the same as the other kids, okay? And It's a very joyous place. When I went there, it seemed very much like an arcade place. It seemed like a place that, since all the kids and everybody there were sick, it was always to kind of keep very positive vibes, very positive, um, to keep the outlook always like life is meant to be enjoyed, you know, not to be miserable. They had the games and, for whatever little activities of time that they could participate in. And my aunt lived with me for probably, I think, at least maybe 4 months, 5 months, maybe even up to six. It wasn't more than 6 months. I'm gonna say somewhere around 4 to 6 months. And I used to get on the bus. And back in those days, for anybody that knew, when you got on that bus, it was scary. Like, you had to be brave. I'm talking about, like, I remember just thinking to myself, like, I'd watch these strangers on the buses. There's no cell phones, and I just remember just being near my aunt, and I was like, you're incredibly brave to do this by yourself, because she had like a tube in her nose, and she would just go about her business, put the little coins in the bus, and it was just normal life. And and I really didn't see anyone young, and I really didn't see that many sick people that even were elderly with tubes in their nose or anything like that. And I was very young. I was like, 8 years old, 9 years old. And anyway, I went there with a number of times, and I remember just thinking I was going to get robbed. I was like, they're going to kill us. They're going to snatch us. We're tiny. And I immediately remember getting into this sort of a very defensive survival, mechanism that like went into like just survival. Like, objective is to get to point A to point B, get when we need to do what we need to get there, and get to the other point, the other, get there what we need to do, and come back home safe and make it. Because you would see in those days, you see like people that were strung out on drugs, and like you didn't know what it was scary, because like I knew I wasn't big enough to take on these people, and these are fully grown men, and you don't know what violation they can do to you. And I remember going there, my mother crying a couple of times, and her eyes red, because it was just a lot. And most of the time that I was there, I was always eating ice cream and playing in the video games. And I'd come and visit my aunt, and she'd come times, and she would always say, "Hey, you can go and play video games if you want. They have arcade games if you want over there." And she goes, "Yeah, I sometimes go over there." And they had a pool. Frankie went with us several times. Julian probably even remembers. They had a little stage, like a professional stage, and it was really nice. They had it all fixed up, and it was like one of the top higher levels of the hospital. And anyway, I was, I think, 9 to 10 years old with my aunt. I walk into her apartment where my grandma lived, my mom's mother, and I talked about the place was so filled with roaches. I said this in my other videos. It was hard for me to comprehend that you're facing, you're dealing with such a sickness, and this is the level of conditioning of life. Like, this is the way life is. And I remember just feeling you really get stripped of the idea that your entitlement of possessions or what you think you were supposed to get. It's more like just life itself. Like life. Like you're alive. Like you're alive. Like even if there's roaches, you're alive. Okay? And I was never greedy. I felt violated at times, a few times, thinking to myself, I'm here playing playing in this arcade game, and these kids, maybe I shouldn't hog up, but there was no one in there. Most of the time, the kids were never in there. Sometimes they were, but very rare. They were always empty. And at least when we went during the night, went there a couple of days. Jillian remembers, and I remember Jillian being a little kid with me, and going to soccer games at night. Like, I'd go there, and I had to go to a soccer game that same night. And, I had a night game with all the strobe lights. They had the tower lights at McKinney soccer field. Like, And back in those days, you felt like a champion. You go out there to a soccer game, and you're trying to make a career to be a professional soccer player. And it was tough because there was no counseling services. And I remember my mother sitting me down in the living room. And she said, Hector, go over there and talk to her. She's very sick. Algo la va a pasar. Se puede. And she was referencing, she was very sick, could possibly die. She didn't have maybe much time left. And I went there by myself in the room, talked to her, and I was like, gosh. And she said she was going to die, or they thought that she might die, and they said they were thinking about putting chemotherapy or something like that. And, she was kind of giving her sort of farewells of life. And, and I remember saying it very clear. I said, believe in God, and I remember just thinking to myself, and I remember there was like a little window, because I want to say there was like a little window that I remember looking out, a little tiny window, and just thinking that God exists. Just think positive, and things are going to be really good. God is good. God is love. God is beautiful. And I didn't say Jesus, even though I was going to church, because I always referenced to Jesus as God to me, and it was more universal, more accepting for people. I was just a kid, and maybe 15 minutes of talking, and then I left. Went outside. My mom was nervous. She's like, family. And but it wasn't like a very nasty cry. Like, it was just a very sad, like, you need help, and there's nothing really much you can do, and we're all suffering. We're all poor. And anyway, my dad would show up. My dad would be drunk and be waiting in the car, drinking his beer and shit, a couple of times. And so I saw a lot of stuff very early in age, and then I was very close to my dad, very, very close. I was like next to him, watching war movies and so on, and he commits suicide in front of me. He doesn't know that I saw him, because I turned the corner and I look, and I just see him chugging down a bottle of pills, and I didn't know what he was doing. I just thought he just wanted to, I guess I was just assuming, I didn't know it was suicide. I just know that he was doing something that I think was bad. And I thought that he just wanted to get fucked up even more, because something miserable was about to happen. And he was like, at least I'm going to go down feeling good and having. And so he did this, and I remember, and the next day he's in a jailhouse, and he's in a nursing home. It's a long story. So he's brain dead, doesn't know how to put a spoon to his mouth, doesn't know his name. And I looked into the eyes of someone who entirely was my father, and I knew, to like that instant. I was looking into the eyes of the same person that could. It wasn't like completely brain dead. It was like completely wiped out. Everything had been wiped out, and he. It was one of the most painful experiences. I tried muscling it through, as hard as I could, be tough, and I couldn't. To be somebody that close, and then really no one to. My mother was going through so much, and there was a lot of shit that my family was really bad doing, or distant family members, and didn't care. But anyway, so I spent 7 years going to a nursing home, picking up the phone, never knowing when his death call was going to ring up. And I saw a lot of tragedy, sick people in the hospital, mentally ill people, and I saw this all the time. And then I had to be sort of a brick wall for Julian. And I personally believe I reformed to it very well, due to my circumstances as not really having much support, because I cared for my father, and I always wanted to carry out his last wishes of, knew his story, that, you accumulated all this time, at least you get that, and that was it. So he passed away. I didn't see him for like the last year of his life, but maybe once. So I have a really good idea what CNAs do. You know, where they would draw blood, they would bring in medication, the other patients, and the different sectors. You know, and sort of how the behavior of the nurses and staff members deal with it, because you're walking into death all the time. You can hear and smell and see death, and this place is a place where it did. I mean, it did feel holy to some degree. It did. It, to me, it felt like a place where human beings did have like a soul experience, and I don't know what the circumstances was of, you know, what people, when you're that young, what you think of life, right? Because you have your whole life ahead of you. And I dealt with all the financial shit, Dad, sorry, they're making me pass gas, where you deal with individual, the worst, oh, well, my dad is slowly repairing his brain. I start sort of running these procedures on him. I would tell him, and I learned this on TV, and I say, can you touch these 3 or 4 different objects and follow me as you do them? And I'd say, okay, I'd touch the pen, I'd touch the paper, I'd touch the cup, and then I'd touch the fork, and then touch the lid on this water jug. And see, I would do 3 objects, then I would do 4. I would do 2, then I would do 3, and see how many he could remember. But I was able to have a conversation, and I very quickly, I think I was about 15 when I did this, 14. And I realized that even though he could carry a conversation, he wasn't there. Like, he couldn't really retain. So, I saw a lot of the horrible stuff. But anyway, I was very compassionate, very daring, took it as it is, like this is the way life is. He was still my father. I saw my father. And I would go and try to make a career for myself DJing, thinking that this technology could eventually allow me to propel my education into another career or branch off and be into that career. And that was kind of the whole situation. So I saw this with no counseling, no money. I was poor. I was eating on friends' tables. The disrespectful acts that I experienced were so gruesome that I bet you no CNA's ever been treated like this. And then you go take care of somebody that's sick. Well, obviously it's just your dad, but I also see other patients, and it was very beautiful. It was some sectors were very beautiful, because I would come. I don't think you could have at that time could find somebody, particularly the way that I was, because I was so understanding to the circumstances and be like, I know this is what God would want. I know this is what, would be a very delighted thing, and you can get honored by that in the sense of like, when you work out and you have your youth, you recognize that they understand that you're in your prime in youth and they've already lived their life, but understand that you don't know what reason they got, why they're there. Obviously, their families left them there and abandoned them there sometimes. Sometimes they just got there because they probably did a lot of shit, a lot of bad things, and it's just that's the way life went. And for some reason, God allowed them to be in their 70s throughout their life, but you gave them the benefit of the doubt that they were just good people. And you come across, people that a lot of the things that I always remember when I was there is they saw the vitality of the youth, and they got a bit of a reflection of who they used to be, and they sort of want to harness that, and I wanted to give them that so that they could sort of gravitate to, you only have a couple weeks, couple months, and sort of get this, because when you see people in their youth, there's this vitality that they give, life of that they give, and it's like nothing else. And so when this happens, I always took it not just to, that's just you analyze it. No, I went in there with intention. This is the graceful acts that I need to recognize so that I could be accredited to it. Much of the actions, and try to have conversation with these people and whatnot. But understanding that is a nursing home. Okay, people die, and I'll go to my friend's house, and then I'd be hanging out with him, or at Robert Zarati's, and he lived right across from a nursing home, and we'd always see the ambulance show up there, and we know what that meant. That was someone else died, someone else died, and then someone else died, and it was tough. So like when I wasn't seeing it there, then it wasn't hard on me. I just knew that was just the way life was, and it seems kind of careless, you know. But that's the way that it was. And so for me, as far as ever getting into that career field, I couldn't do it for very long. In my opinion, I don't think I could. It's not because I'm tired. I just want to do something else. I think, I wouldn't mind doing it for a little while. But at my age, to my circumstances now, if I was younger, 25, yeah, I would have gone into the field because I enjoy the idea of going to work and the whole structural fittings of it. And obviously, there's a lot of females. Most females that want to have great careers are in the medical field, and they get high level degrees. And you're likely to find someone who's compassionate. You know that someone that is working in the medical field is likely to be has the understanding and compassion, no matter what field it is. But I think that obviously it's not a lifelong career. I'm too old for that. But I think it'd be great. I think it'd be great to get maybe EK technician or something that's just for 4 months, 3 months. Maybe. But even then, it seems impossible. It would be definitely a miracle. But I'm looking at these videos and just kind of skimming through. I may not even do any of it. I just go to this computer class. But I don't even know if I can be accepted to this college with my, if I don't pass. Because if I don't pass, I have to pay $10 every time to take the test, and I don't know how many times I can try to take the test before I can pass it, or how many times you can take the test. Well, they say 3-month break, you can only take it 3 times for like a GED or whatever. But, it is one of the reasons that intrigues me that I talked about this, I use the word intrigued, is I'd like to know what I did that could have been better, what I did that was good, and what I did wrong being in those environments with that education. So if I learned what the CNA does, and I learned all the paperwork and all the stuff they taught in school and passed it, I would be able to look and reflect everything that I had done, from being with Ceci playing card games, Uno, to playing these games and watching her inject herself with milk, being dependent. She had to be very independent of herself to take care of herself. There wasn't mommy around. There wasn't, so she had to learn to take care of herself at a very young age. Put her protein milk, and you'd see the milk swivel down, into her nose, and however they did it. So I think that, I had seen a lot of it. I never got paid for it. It's a horror story what had happened to me. For someone to have done what they had done to me, at that level degree, is one of the worst nightmares that something like that could happen. Especially with the money involved, and tragic, and the sacrifice I had to put in. I got nothing for it. They just threw some pennies at me, and that was it. And you don't understand that. If I was lucky enough to be born and given this body, you realize and cherish it even more, and realize how precious it is, your youth, when you watch the old like that. When you watch old people and know that I'm going to be experiencing that same fate if I get lucky. If one of the ways I get lucky, to be old in a nursing home, which won't, obviously I'm a prior cancer patient. But I never cried. Believe it or not, even though I don't know what it was. I never cried, like, oh, my dad's, but I did get angry, like an angry sad, because it felt so much of just life being thrown away and someone getting the profits. I thought my mom's boyfriend was taking the money, and nobody came to the fucking rescue, and ultimately they didn't. And my mother was in a very bad position. What my brother went through, and my father was a World War II veteran. He took care of the sick and dying, and so I saw a lot of that stuff. Many people that get into that field of work, don't have that experience. But would be very intrigued to find out, like learning all this sort of material, that what I did wrong, what I did good. And I'm not saying, like, I say this to, like, I'm trying to see what I did wrong just or whatever. The educational part would seem interesting. Like, what protocols do they have for someone that does this for a living, right? And you know, but I was never, ever, 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 ever suicidal. Never, ever. When I was younger, going to these places, ever. There was never. I was always like, my dad needs me. My dad needs me. And I have to be there for the family. And Julian was very young, and I had to take Julian. And Julian was very young, and I had to be a sort of brick wall to him. And I had to be looking for him, be like, hey, let's go visit Dad. He'd be playing with his friends and stuff, because my dad would be asking for him. So, but anyway, I'm going through all these videos and see what I pick. Kind of get an idea. Kind of gets me the idea of, like, man, if I was younger, and if I had actually been in a really just unbelievable environment and not have these electronic devices, there's no doubt in my mind, in my youth, I would have been able to do it 100%, because there was a sense of different career, there was a huge sense of different career, huge sense of something that was more important of a career choice. And I always thought that it was, I knew that, it is very intense, that your life would eat, breathe, live, everything would be that. And, you get all sort of suited up, and, you're this sort of educated medical person, whatever department that is, and you're sort of this caretaker of this knowledge of caretaking. And, but in my youth, I know I would have liked it. I know I would have, because there's so many different branches of hospitals you can work in, and so there's been so many doors have been closed on me because I didn't have a GED, and I wasn't in good environments, and there was so much stress and so much awful things that were going on that, it wasn't me just postponing things, but nobody listened. I don't see why if my brother Frankie and my brother Julian or Marco, that they should have gotten degrees. They should have had degrees in their lifetime. If they're living in this mansion, you could do anything you want. You have it, and but living at home rent-free or having a little minor job by going to school is the absolute key role. Would be suited up like one of these college intelligence students. You can take this caretaking knowledge and go to many places. I met people from when I had my bone marrow transplant. I met this girl, this beautiful girl. She was from London, and she was a nurse. And Baylor Hospital. She lived in the UK and transferred, became a U.S. citizen here, and was a full-time nurse, registered nurse. But the sort of like-minded people. There's a lot of drama that goes into it as well, but it's definitely a passion. That if I knew that this, like the CNAs, a lot of the stuff they do the sort of bad, not the bad, but they do the sort of the very bottom barrel of the work, as opposed to do some of the more technical stuff. Like the nurses and many other fields. They do a lot of the higher end, uh, uh, calculating things that take a lot of more responsibility. But yeah, so, but I'm just going through them. Me going, never gonna happen. It's not something that I look forward toward. There's too many things that are going on that nobody's really listening. It gives a shit. They don't know the broad circumstances in the world that I live in and what's happened and what they're doing, how I'm being trained. But it would have been great, to have. I didn't know the world was going to change. They're going to start moving people all over the place, and I found out all these people were stealing money, fake doctors and fake nurses and whatnot. But I think it would have been great, yeah, because there's so many hot girls, but they're all smart. Like you can't go up in no hospital and be working there and didn't have the academics mentally to really understand what getting to the program of what's going on here, right? But there's so many different parts. X-ray technicians. There's so many departments, and understanding that you bring that stuff home with you. Like when you deal, like I remember seeing a while ago. I saw a nurse like blistering, crying when she lost a patient or something. But she was at work doing it, and I thought, you have to keep that away, from those, maybe in the car, home, but not like that. And I heard got suspended. I keep making me pass gas, and it happens, and you see a lot of tragedy, and you have to be a very uplifting person. You have to have a certain personality to be able to tolerate that, because you make relationships with people, and you think of the departed, and it is always a job, but you're getting paid for it. But the way at least I saw it, this has to do with the nature of life, that you're not going to be alive, neither am I, and it goes by very fast. What did you do in this life that Jesus and God would have wanted? And what's going to be best fitting? Is he going to be saying, thank you for taking care of those people when nobody else would? I was watching you the whole time, and I could read your mind, and I knew the actions and where your heart was, and I knew you did these things at such, horrible situations, and you did it beautifully. I'm going to grant you, a full set of hair for the rest of your life. I don't know, I'm just saying, but is he going to be, if that life is as precious as it is, and you always have to always think, at least the way I always, saw this is, you have this sort of preciousness of existence, and this existence you want it to be good when it's over with, because you never know. Car wreck. There's nurses that drive home, being a nursing student, get killed in a car wreck. That person was dedicated to all the brain activity. They didn't become a nurse, but can you imagine just doing that all the time, and it's over? What happens? Your intentions were all good. Wasn't like, oh, I'm just driving here in this jet airplane and going to go play at a party and watch a bunch of people get drugged up and possibly rape, whoever they want, and then do more drugs and became more sinful. I don't know. So, but you capture a lot of what money can't buy, and the awful things that you see in the world. A lot of nurses and CNAs. You see a lot of stuff. They're very hard. It's a very core, very heavy core, very core, in my opinion. You know, a very core to. Um, it's a very core to go about your business and be able to let go of that, start a new day. Remember, that's the way I dealt with it. I cut ties off when I left there, and I, had my sad moments, because sometimes you did absorb it, and I dealt with it at the time smoking weed, and trying to be with my friends to have a normal childhood, teenage life. And I never told them, that I just saw so and so who just died. He was my dad's roommate, and this guy. My dad, punched this guy in the chest or some shit. I don't know if he killed him. Nobody, fighting over a jacket, and fighting over a coat, a $3 coat, a $2 coat, like a coat that you would have found on the floor, on the back of a Walgreens, just a, cabin wooden cotton coat. I mean, it was wild. And you see the people that, nobody cares about. Like, nobody visits them. Like, they truly are just waiting to die. And, you take all that stuff, it over time, it can be very harsh if you don't have a healthy environment. But there's a lot that's in that field is that you see. That does the soul exist? How does God behave to these reactions? Because this isn't winning the lottery. This is whether you get to open your eyes or not, whether you continue the existence and going to see any people ever again. And there's so many different stories that you hear, and tragic ones. And, most of them, what I felt like I always saw is they miss their youth. They remember their youth when they saw me. Most of them obviously, a lot of people don't come and visit them, but when they see something more very healthy and strong and firm, it assured them of the youth that they used to have, or kind of help them propel a little bit more. And but it always felt like, I remember talking to a old lady once, and she was sitting in this chair and had some brilliant eyes. And I remember she was just looking at me like I was some sort of, kind of like a saint or something. And, because this is a place that nobody wants to hang out at, nobody cares. And I just remember getting this huge impression to this youth, the person they used to be, like these visions that they were getting when they were 19 years old and they're at a carnival, they're at a fair park, getting some cotton candy and being on a date with a beautiful guy and winning a teddy bear, laughing and riding the roller coasters, the fire wheel, in a small town. And it was a lot of the small things that when they were youth and brilliant and vibing, and I saw a lot of this when I looked at people. Like, I was remembering they were young and they, the full set of hair, it was flush in the color, the color of the body that they were giving at its prime, and they had their whole life ahead of them, and it was beautiful to sort of see that they realize that they got to live that. And but I do remember that. It's for me, I so many times I hear people crying, some asking for blankets. Some people were talking like there was nobody in the room, and I'd hear them talking, and I would just go about my business. It was, for me, that's how I dealt with it. One of the ways I dealt with it, I could be walking down and go smoke some cigarettes with my dad, and kept it as the way it is. This is the way life is. This is the way it keeps going, and never. I wanted to get my dad out of there. The better environment, but I knew this, that he put himself there. He, and I knew the separation between my mother and father. Okay, you did get to live your life, and my mother was still somewhat young, and she put a lot there. Okay, but I think I had a really well-minded mindset for the whole circumstance. It wasn't perfect. Smoke weed. I can tell you, I smoked. My dad told me, because my dad wanted to make me good grades, and I remember being 16, and my mom told him I was smoking weed. I was like, "What'd you tell me, man?" Because I never ever went to my dad's nursing home fucked up. Like, it would bother me. It would always bother me to go to that. If I felt if I didn't go at least once a week, I would feel guilty. Like, God, it was like a Sunday service. I just would feel guilty. I would always feel guilty. I had to be there like it was a church service. And I was needing to, because God was like, telling me, like, and, I was going to say, yeah, I saw my father, I forgot what I was going to say. There's something I was going to follow this up with. I can't remember. Yeah, so, I smoked weed with my dad once. And I never went there. I went there to my dad's nursing home after doing cocaine, like, once, like 2 days after, where your nose is still kind of sore, when that happened to me. Did that a couple, like, no more than twice, the entire time I was there. And I made it an assurance to never, like, I did not feel right if I went there. I didn't even want to smoke weed and go there. I did it a few times, smoke weed, and I would just feel guilty. I would just feel like, man, what am I doing? I'm smoking weed, and here's for visiting, and I could not be in those environments with any type of intoxication. I could not do it. I don't know why. I would made sure that it was before I did, any drugs, or I had at least a couple of days of recovery to then go there sober. And but I smoked weed with my dad once, and I thought I killed him. I thought I killed my own dad. And I got real scared. I smoked weed with him because he kept on bothering me. Hey, bring me a joint, bring me weed. And my dad, and I was like, all right, I'll bring one joint, okay, just one. We'll smoke a joint. Made it all perfect there, and I remember walking back, and he was telling me he felt dizzy, and I thought that my father was going to have a brain seizure. I thought I killed my father. I thought I literally just killed my father, and I was scared. I was so nervous, like, I think I just killed my father, who just spoke to the president. I was like, I think I just killed him. And we're walking. I had to help him walk back to his room, and he said he felt really dizzy. And I was like, ugh. And I was like nervous. I thought I had just killed my own father smoking a joint. And I was like, man, I'm never doing this shit again. I was scared. And my father agreed to. He was like, no, I don't want to. Yeah, I feel kind of dizzy. Yeah, I'm all right then. Okay, whatever. I don't want to do it again. And but it's a very career that I think that many other careers that I would have chosen would have been a huge top pick, without a doubt. Simply because, also because there's, to find a compassion person that is outside completely from the world of music, and that is searching for a family, searching for a great supporter, that's definitely something. And have that knowledge that I would have been able to go to school with him and better was the huge peak for me to be able to be like, oh my God, I can, find somebody in my life, be young and sort of develop things. And it's never happened for me, you know. But anyway, I thought I'd make a video. I'm gonna go through these videos, and but may choose to take some sort of driving course or something. Maybe just a couple. I'm gonna have to do a lot of searching, but I first have to take this test on Monday, see if I pass, if I fail, whatever goes on. But as long as these electronic devices are shooting me, I'll never be able to get a degree. Won't ever be able to. Not gonna happen. Not anything that's more than maybe a couple of months, for sure. But it'd be great to realize this educational material, because what the educational perspective view of this is compared to just the way that I dealt with it. Because I had a lot of field work in this, and you have to be, it's a very solid person and a deep character of a person that works in that field. It's just part of the situation. They deal with a lot. It's very harsh, but rewarding. But it's a very reality of. I think it gives a lot of people also a sense of God. Could give you a lot of the sense of God belief that there's something afterwards, and whatever it is that you're doing, you're giving something to the very giving something to the very minimalist of the existence they're having in life. A glass of water, Kool-Aid, and before they depart. And they wouldn't have had it had you not been there. And you may not get to get there one day. You may not get to get there, but understanding that God saw you, even if it's a job, God saw what you did, and you're gonna have mess ups, here and there. I had my own mess ups. I wasn't the best, I had a chance to take care of this guy, and I didn't give him a shower. I tried to comfort him, kind of best as I could, but I don't know. I think the electronic devices, I didn't say the right shit. I don't think they wanted me there. And it's a reality of the situation, but you have to really think of yourself. It's a job. You get there and you leave to keep it balanced. That's what I do. In order for me to be able to enjoy it, was kind of a bargain. It felt maybe sometimes it was a bit of a bargain. Like, okay, God, I'm doing this for God, but keep me safe. Keep me safe. At least this is, even if He could take your life at any given point, right? But that you're putting something good in the credit of God, and a very core, because there's a lot very small things in the existence, laying in the bed, because I was there myself, laying in a bed, very simple things of life that you think about, that you got to do what you didn't get to do. And you talk to these people, and it all passed by. All of them said, every time, it went by so fast. It all went by so fast. Everything went by so fast. I did this, and they're not here anymore. And to me, it was more like the sense of, like, in much of these conversations I had with people, like, was God there? Is there a good afterlife? Was there a good afterlife? Was there going to be a good after? Did it even matter, the good stuff I did? Like when I would sort of hear these people talk, did it even matter? But I don't know. So anyway, I'm going to take a look at these videos over time and keep y'all posted. Test days Monday, 3-4 hours. I do envision a lot myself, like, man, if I, you see these college students, get all prep and they have their backpacks and a little water bottle, they have like maybe a little toy or something, little Rubik's Cube with them on their keychains, and you go about your business. Maybe they listen to little headphones and music, and getting your little education on. You're becoming a professional. A clean professional to do something of a career. And it's a career that you help the sick and dying. It's a career that you help them and you send them on their way. In whatever way that is. And but it's very different than any other career, printing fields, plumbing, any of that stuff, because electricians, it's completely different, because you're dealing with the reality of the stories and the visions of people, of the final test, the final. Did it matter? Did any of it matter? Is there something that saw the good and efforts and education to not just the materialistic things? Like, why did this person get away with so much? Why do they lie about this? Is there, that you can't control it, but you have such dear hope and faith that it does, and it feels great. It does feel great, when those good days did happen. But there's a lot of bad days, a lot of bad days, but it's a strong character to be in those fields. Many of them didn't have the experience I did and enjoy it, but I couldn't do it. Not at my age, and I don't think I could do that full time all the time and for the paycheck, right? Because you do work for it, right? You earn money, but I didn't get paid for any of it, none of it, and don't know the price tag I paid. But it's the way it is. Keep you updated on this college stuff.